It is Friday morning. That means that I am here to do another mock stream or mock draft live stream where we are trying to win $1.5 million on Underdog Fantasy. Today, I am joined by the new guy at Football Guys. I think you're still technically the new guy, right, Bob?
I
Have we
am
brought
for
anybody
sure.
else in? All right,
For
yeah. So the
sure.
new guy, Bob Harris, a guy who's been in the industry for quite some time. Really excited to pick his brain a little bit, find out some new player takes, some new draft strategies. But before we dive in, Bob, go ahead and introduce yourself. Let everyone know where they can find all of your content, written, audio, all that good stuff.
You can find me at footballguys.com, the website, and on the YouTube channel, The Audible. It's been great joining my friends in this endeavor here, people that I've been working with for many, many years, and some that I've been working with fewer years, but I'm enjoying all the same. Before we get too deep into this, though, we're talking about the split, but beyond that, you can also hear me on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio. Right now, it's Football Diehard Show. It's the off-season portion. NFL season starts next week, though, right? Basically,
Dude, it's coming up quick.
yeah. So we'll go. We've been doing Saturdays all off season long, Mike Dempsey and myself, and but we'll go into our summer mode. We'll start July 15th. We'll be on 5 days that week, and then we'll go to our 4 nights a week, which carries into the season. Then you'll be able to, once the season starts, it'll be back to the 6 days a week, including a Saturday night on NFL radio, the Sunday pregame show that I do with Jeff Mann. So there'll be no shortage of Bob Harris and plenty more of me on footballguys.com. Right now, check my fantasy notebook every Monday and my top 5 fantasy headlines video on Fridays. One come out later today.
Yeah, you've been staying busy here, and I mean, it was just such a natural fit. Like when Joe said that we were bringing you on staff, everyone was just like, "Oh, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Of course, Bob would be on staff, and we love having you here. It's been awesome seeing what you're doing with us." But yeah, you talk about it like how quickly the season is coming up here. I saw a tweet a couple days ago on July 1st where somebody said next month we have NFL football. I was like, wait a minute. And I started like look, and I'm like, oh my goodness, like it is going to be here before we know it. Preseason kicks off in just a few weeks. Training camps. It's this is a fun time of year. This is the time of year where I try to kind of really pay attention to what's happening in training camps and keep my ear close to the beat because we get married to our takes in February, March, April, May. But at the end of the day, this is the time of year where we start hearing these drum beats about these guys that we might not be expecting. Like if you were paying attention last year, Kyron Williams, Puka Nacua, these are the guys that were getting smoke out of training camp. And then Jaleel McLaughlin, a guy who was getting smoke again this year in training camp. So this is where you can kind of find some of that gold. Is there anything recently that you've been hearing, Bob, that
For sure.
you paid attention to?
It's funny because I just was yesterday, I think it was, listening to Jorge Martin. He's doing a series of teams on his FFB Familia podcast, and Jordan Rodriguez was on, and she was talking about that last year. Everyone's seeing the Puka coming down, and those are the things we're looking for. Look, the Jaleel McLaughlin is the one right now. Our own Cecil Lamby got the ball rolling there, but I think anybody who's been watching this, you're trying to watch, like we sit here and we focus on numbers, and that's all well and good, but there's some things between the lines that you have to pay attention to, like what the coaches want, the desired outcomes. And clearly Sean Payton has a thing for Jaleel McLaughlin. We should all be paying attention to that. But also we need to, I think, Dave, the key to all this is, I kind of like to oversimplify it a little bit, but we tell ourselves happy stories to draft the players we like, and we tell ourselves unhappy stories about the players we want to avoid, right? But the key to success is being willing to say, oh, the story I'm telling is not right. It's changing and going with it, right? So as it morphs, and that's okay, right? There's new facts hit the ground. Things change, and the things that you thought in May are not necessarily true in July or don't prove to be true. But that's part of being steeped in this all off season long. We can start listening at the scouting combine is my favorite part, where every coach and GM, they stand on the podium, they say something, and it's surprising how much of the truth gets told there. And maybe you don't believe it, but you have the whole off season. And that's what I spend this time of year doing, measuring what was said, what happens against what was said, and what we think the desired outcomes are against what the actual outcomes seem to be, and how the teams are adjusting to that. It's a lot of moving pieces, but this is my favorite part of the year for that reason. We're kind of plugging all our little bits of information into our data timeline. And at the end of the thing, we got to have this full, robust timeline of information that we can use to build our happy stories.
And I think Chris Harris says it best that we build up our mind palace. We're like
Yes.
right now at this point in the season, it's like, well, this is going to be the wide receiver one. This is going to be the wide receiver two. Maybe the wide receiver three can have some boomer bust games here and there. And then the tight end is going to be featured, but they're going to run some two tight. And at the end of the day, week one kicks off and then that just explodes. And everything that we thought we knew that we were so confident in suddenly takes a completely new shape. And that's why I think those first few weeks, and this is a best ball team that we're drafting right now where we don't have to worry about setting lineups and roster management and waivers and all that. But it's really those first few weeks are so pivotal because that's when we see, this mind palace that we've built up, as Chris likes to say, just explodes. And then we have
Right.
to adapt and kind of reshape what we're thinking. And maybe we thought last year in the offseason that Kyron Williams was an undersized, unathletic back who couldn't do anything besides play third down. But if you watch those first couple of games, you had to quickly shift that notion and
Right.
start drafting Kyron Williams or start picking up Kyron Williams.
It's the letting go that's the hardest thing. I can remember, I think it was like early last December. I went on the couch with Sig and we were talking about Stephon Diggs at the time, and we were playing a little game of who'd you rather, basically. And like I was just off of Diggs because I just like what I'm seeing is really it's happening. Right.
Mhm.
And now it's on him to prove. I mean, he has an entire history and we can fall back on that entire history, but there's a narrower band. The story we had told ourselves going into the season wasn't coming true. You have to be willing to let go of that story, that thing that you built up.
Well, here we are. We pulled the fourth pick, and I don't know
I'll
about
take
you,
that.
Bob, but I think this is my favorite pick because you're guaranteed one of Christian McCaffrey, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, or Jamar Chase.
I'll take it.
After that, then I think you start running into some. Should you draft Justin Jefferson or Amon-Ra St. Brown? Do you reach and get Bijan or Brees here? But I think this top four is about as clear cut as it can
Yep.
get. And I am A-OK sitting at that 104 spot because I don't have to make a decision. I'm going to let the people
Made
drafting
for
ahead
you.
of me make that decision for me. If Christian McCaffrey falls into my lap, great. If it's CeeDee Lamb, if it's Tyreek Hill, if it's Jamar Chase, cannot be upset about any of those guys. So I don't know if you have a stance here where you'd prefer Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Bijan, or do you kind of have the same mindset there at 104?
I have the same mindset. Right after that, though, I'm fine go dipping into Bijan and Brees. I think they're running
Yeah.
backs that have the ability to push for that running back one overall spot. And I'm fine with either of them. They're probably my preferred choices, although Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to be in that mix with me as well.
So we're going to go ahead and take Jamar Chase here at 104, correct?
Works for me.
And well, first of all, Bob, as I say on the show all the time, it's not what works for me. This is your show today. I am simply here as the mediator making the picks for you. But I think what it comes down to, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, if any of those guys finished as the wide receiver one by like a substantial margin, like outscoring everybody else by 4 or 5 points per game, it wouldn't surprise me one bit. And like maybe we haven't seen that true ceiling from Jamar Chase yet, but we know it's there. He had the hip injury last year and Joe Burrow was hurt, but it seemed like it was starting to come together prior to that. So Tyreek Hill, we saw it last year. CeeDee Lamb, we saw it last year. So I think that's just the thing to do is take whoever falls to you here. I see somebody, Chi-Town True in the chat said that they are there at 110. So we'll be keeping an eye on that one as well. But Bob, I know you've done quite a few drafts at this point. Is there anybody specific that you are looking at as somebody that you really want to get in round two?
Round two is like kind of no.
Yeah.
Round three, I have Derrick Henry on my mind.
Mhm.
At that point, if he starts climbing up, maybe that he'll become that. But round two seems like the most ambient. Well, past pick 5 or so in round
Yeah.
one through round two, like I wait to see what's falling to me. And I've ended up with a number of different things. I think I usually end up, going with 2 wide receivers and then trying to, aim for Henry in round 3 if I can get him. There are other backs I can live with as well.
So we've still got a little bit of time up until this pick, though. And again, I'll talk about it here because we are drafting on underdog. Do you prioritize stacking at all when you're drafting these teams? Like now that we have Jamar Chase, are we looking at Joe Burrow later in the draft as a priority target? Are you looking to add T. Higgins, not Joe Mixon, Zach Moss, or any of these other Bengals? Or are you just kind of taking the best player available and just trying to score as many points without really thinking about stacking and roster construction?
I think it depends on what I'm doing. Like in a BBM, I'm probably going to be more interested in stacking, and maybe a little correlation than I am just like as I'm going through drafts. I mean, a lot of these drafts for me are just like, we talked a little bit about for the show. It's like lifting weights. You're exercising your draft muscle.
Yep.
You want to get it in shape for when the drafts that matter most to you in August come around. So no, I'm mostly going at this point best player available. But there are leagues where I'll say, okay, I'm gonna work on the flex. I'm gonna work on the stacks and work on some builds that maybe get me in the running for some big money. But that's mostly not my lane.
I also want to shout out right here, Michael Vidala saying that he is on
Mike,
day 5 of a 26-day road trip in Fort Collins right now, my old stomping grounds that I spent almost 6 years living in. And then I also did that trip through Arches and Zion and all of Utah and Arizona. So, Michael, if you're looking for any tips or anything, things to do in Fort Collins, shoot me a DM. More than happy to help you out. Bob, here we are coming up again in just 2 picks. So far, we've got some pretty good targets here. I'd be happy with any of these 3: Brandon Ayuk, Jalen Waddle, or Saquon Barkley, but also Debo Samuel, Mike Evans. Reaching down a little bit further, Devon Achane. There are plenty of good players on the board. Who do you typically look to draft here?
I would probably be going Waddle here. And someone just took Ayuk, so that makes it a little easier for me. The San Francisco receivers, I'm a little leery of. I'm more in on Ayuk, and I'm not letting the uncertainty chase me away. But I'm perfectly comfortable with Waddle right here.
All right, perfect. And my headphones just died, so hopefully this isn't picking up a little bit of an echo. I've got you coming out through my
You're good.
laptop speakers right now, so hopefully my mic isn't picking it up. But yeah, that's a pretty standard start right here. What I'd be looking for: Jamar Chase and Jalen Waddle. Waddle's a guy that I have said countless times, and you've probably heard me say this, Bob. I don't think we've really seen the true potential from Waddle either. We've seen him be a high volume guy, we've seen him be a high efficiency guy, and then we've seen him be an injured guy, like when it all
Right.
started coming together last year. So now heading into year 4, he's got the big contract. If he can just stay healthy, that seems to be the only thing holding him back. And then, of course, there's the contingent value that we don't
Huge.
really talk about with the early round
Huge.
picks. Yeah, like if something
Huge.
happens to Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle is suddenly what, a top 8 wide receiver?
For sure. And maybe better. I mean, that's the thing for me, is especially when you land him in the second round. Tyreek Hill getting a little older, and I mean, we saw last year he got a little nicked up too. So yeah, that's it. The contingent upside there in round 2 seems huge, and also just the upside alone is huge.
Now, Kyron Williams here at 304 might be a little bit early for Kyron. We're seeing him typically fall into the late third, but I wouldn't
Yep.
hate that if we wanted to add a running back here. But there's still plenty of solid wide receivers available: Mike Evans, Devonta Smith, Malik
Right.
Neighbors, Cooper Kupp. Who would you prioritize here? They're going off the board quick.
Did Evans come off just now?
Evans just got drafted. DK Metcalf went off the board, and then there goes Derrick Henry, which also would have been a nice pick. So we've got Devonta Smith, Malik Neighbors, Cooper Kupp, Kyron Williams, Stephon Diggs, Mike Pittman,
Yeah.
Tank Dell on the board.
I'm probably looking at the wide receivers right here, like Devontae Smith. I love Malik Neighbors. I think, I made a big argument last year, that we were drafting Bijan versus Gibbs wrong. And I think, you see the same thing with Marvin Harrison and Malik Neighbors. And I get it. Neighbors is not an ideal quarterback. Adam Thielen last year would like us to know you don't need a great quarterback to put up solid numbers. And Adam Thielen is no Malik Neighbors. So that would probably be, an ideal choice. I think he just went. It looks like, yes.
So, yeah, we took Malik Neighbors. That's who I queued
Oh,
up.
we got him?
Ended up
Okay.
getting Malik Neighbors here. So our start right now: Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Malik Neighbors. Now, Bob, I have a tendency to overthink, galaxy brain, some might call it. And one of the reasons that I'm trying to draft Malik Neighbors right now, and tell me if I'm crazy, because you don't have to hold back. I might be crazy here. We're seeing this New York Giants offseason Hard Knocks. I don't know if you watched episode 1. It was a ton of fun.
Yeah.
We always see the Hard Knocks bump, and my guess is that when they get to the draft episode and we see how crazy this New York front office is about Malik Neighbors, we're going to see Malik Neighbors start creeping up draft boards a little bit. When they say, we don't need a quarterback, we've got this guy, we're going to, you can just imagine a scenario where they are going to be hyping up Malik Neighbors and everybody's going to get excited about him. So I like drafting him now because I think he's probably going to go up about half a round in value over the next month or so.
Like we saw that with Gibbs last year as well, right? Like, I mean, I loved Jahmyr Gibbs in the 4th round. I still liked him in the 3rd round, just not as much as I did in the 4th. And I think that's, we're going to see the same with Malik Neighbors, who, arguably, I mean, depending on who you listen to, any of those top 3 guys, it's not hard to find people who thought their guy is the best. And Malik Neighbors is one of those guys. He's head and shoulders better than everybody else on the Giants roster right now. I'm not going to let the quarterback situation scare me off a talent like that, as I mentioned. And like the examples are copious, right? I mean, we can just look at Mike Evans last year. I mean, we all thought Baker Mayfield was going to destroy him. I mean, the quarterback does not always destroy a good wide receiver, people. And it's not just last year. It goes back multiple years.
And, there's different types of wide receivers too. Like,
right.
I'm trying to think of an example of a wide receiver that I wouldn't like in New York. Maybe like a Tyler Lockett type of guy, or a Deontay
or
Johnson
any of the other
guy.
ones that are currently there. No,
exactly right.
No, like I don't mind Jalen Hyatt late in drafts right now. Like he's a player I kind of have an eye on. So, but I mean, I think right now he's just so much better than the rest, and he's can play all the spots. And I mean, I won't be surprised if we're not talking about him in the same. We'll be grouping him with Chase and Jefferson as the former LSU guys that are just unstoppable.
I think so. And what I like about him is like he's not a guy who needs to see a ton of targets, even if this is a slow paced team, if they aren't running a ton of plays. He's got that game breaking speed where all he needs
Yes.
is one touch and he can take it for 80 yards and a touchdown. And that's what I'm really looking for is the guy who can have those huge impact plays like that. And Malik Neighbors, first of all, he's the unquestioned wide receiver one, but second of all, like he doesn't need to really work on chemistry. He
Right.
doesn't really need a good quarterback. Like just get the ball in his
Daniel
hands. Like
Jones will suit him fine.
exactly. They're going to be running jet sweeps and they're going to be getting the ball to him on screens. They're going to do whatever they can to get the ball in Malik Neighbors' hand, especially with Saquon Barkley out of the picture now.
And
So here we are up in. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just saying, we're coming up to our pick here. Still, both quarterbacks sitting atop Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts. We've also got Amari Cooper, Isaiah Pacheco, who I think is grossly mispriced right now if he's fallen to the end of the fourth round.
Yeah.
Trey McBride and Mark Andrews both on the board as well. Travis Kelce, Trey McBride, and Sam Laporta all just went off, so we're seeing a little tight end run. One pick before us, though, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. There goes Jalen Hurts. So Josh Allen, Amari Cooper, Isaiah Pacheco, Terry McLaurin, Mark Andrews. Who do you prefer here, Bob?
Pacheco's the pick here for me.
Yeah.
I mean, just like, you're in that point now where there's a handful of running backs. If I miss out on Henry, Pacheco's right on that list of guys and probably next on that list for me. So he's definitely the player for me here. I am interested in tight ends here. Like, Travis Kelce is interesting. I feel like whether it's Josh Allen or Kelce, some of these guys we're getting discounts on, right? Mark Andrews, we're getting a huge discount on. Yep. Would love to land him. But we'll see about that. I think those are the guys.
What I'm doing here, because we've only got 3 teams that are picking in between us. They get to double tap. So when I see 2 tight ends that I have pretty close in my rankings, Mark Andrews and Dalton Kincaid, I'd prefer to get Isaiah Pacheco, where I think there's a pretty big tier fall off after him. And then hopefully, like we did earlier in the draft, we kind of let these drafters make the decision for us. Like if they take Andrews, we take Kincaid. If they take Kincaid, we take Andrews. So hopefully one of these tight ends falls to us. And if not, I've got 2 fallback options, both Hollywood Brown and Josh Jacobs.
I love Hollywood Brown.
Either of those guys here.
And I do like Josh Jacobs. I think, once I get that anchor running back, I'm probably waiting a little later on the running back. But I do love Jacobs. If you listen to my video later today, you'll hear more about him on the top 5 fantasy headlines. He will be a part of that. So yeah, I'm like, I do think, once I get that anchor running back, I'm more than willing I'm probably going to lean more towards the receiving asset, whether it's a tight end, if it's one of the top tight ends, or another wide receiver. I'd like to load up on the wide receivers if I'm missing out on the running back, once I get that first running back.
Well, at this point, we're guaranteed either Andrews or Kincaid. Both are available. And I think you said you prefer Andrews.
I do.
Kincaid, as do I. So we'll throw both of them in the queue. If KB ran in 7 on the clock right now, takes Andrews, we'll take Kincaid. If not, we get Andrews.
Yep.
Now let's go back to Isaiah Pacheco, because I want to talk about him for a quick second. And we got Mark Andrews here. I mean, that's unbelievable in the middle of the 5th round. Crazy to see him fall in there
all day.
But with Isaiah Pacheco, I ask people this question all the time, and it's something that I find myself contemplating quite a bit. If Isaiah Pacheco is drafted, let's just we don't even have to say round 1 or anything crazy. Like if Isaiah Pacheco is drafted in round 3 or round 4 of the NFL draft, as opposed to where he went at the end of round 7, we'd probably be looking at Pacheco as like a top 5 running back, right? Like, is it still draft capital? Is that the only reason that he's falling to where he does?
I think so. And, like Brett Veach, when he drafted him, said, I can find a 7th round running back who's going to be 1,000-yard back. And he did that. But in the back of your mind, he could probably do it again, right? So like you're thinking, they're not going to hold on to these guys too tightly. Isaiah Pacheco's style is one that, he is not shy about the contact. His feet hit the ground hard. I mean, he just like everything he does is hard. So I'm just like I love having him. I think there's not anybody cutting into his workload as long as he's healthy, and I think should be considered right there definitely as a running back 1 for me. But I think you're right. I think the perception is that he's kind of an outlier and that he got his job and shouldn't have got it. But I think that's the plan in Kansas City. That's the Brett Veach way.
And the knock over the last couple of years is like, well, Jerick McKinnon's there, and we know Jerick McKinnon is going to get ramped up as the playoffs approach. And I think that was a very valid concern, because we saw McKinnon over the last 2 years grow his role a little bit, but McKinnon's out of the picture now. Like there's nobody there. Like I don't think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a threat to take touches away. So I've got Pacheco as my RB9 in rankings. He's the RB11 in consensus rankings, but when you're that high up the list of rankings, just 2 spots is, a pretty significant flag plant by me. So I love getting Pacheco when I can. And then of course Andrews at tight end. I just released my tight end rankings, which caused quite a ruckus on Twitter because mine are a little bit against the consensus, but Andrews is still my tight end too. And it's crazy to me seeing him fall right now behind. Like, don't get me wrong, what Laporta did last year was great, but I don't think Andrews should be falling into the 5th round like we were just able to get him.
I don't think so either. I have Andrews as tight end 4. I think I could make an argument taking him ahead of Trey McBride. I think you could make an argument taking him ahead of Sam Laporta. I'm not going to make an argument taking him ahead of Travis Kelce. And I have Isaiah Pacheco is running back 10 on my rankings. So
yeah,
we're right in the same page essentially.
So we got another pick coming up shortly here. And again, I mean, we see this on underdogs specifically in these first 7 rounds. It is just loaded with wide receivers, and there are some good running backs here. Kenneth Walker is probably going to be available when we're on the board, and I think he's another guy who's a little underpriced right now. But really, this is probably our last chance to get another wide receiver before it really falls off.
Yep.
So we've got a Xavier Worthy, we've got Jordan Addison. I wouldn't even mind. I find myself doing this quite a bit, double tapping kind of elite tight ends, getting Mark Andrews and George Kittle. If they both have a big week, one of them just goes to your flex. Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice both went off the board, but Jordan Addison, DeAndre Hopkins, Lad McConkey, Brian Thomas, and then we've also got, like I said, George Kittle, Kenneth Walker, a little bit further down the list, Deontay Johnson, Christian Watson.
Too far ahead on ADP to get Christian Watson, who I love. I mean, I absolutely
will probably be there with our next pick. So right now, are we going DeAndre Hopkins, Kenneth Walker, Lad McConkey?
I'm going to I love what Waldman said about Lad McConkey getting maybe up to 130 targets. I think I'd play that.
Yeah, I like it. I've got no pushback there. I mean, at the end of the day, I just want Chargers players. And I don't know. Like, again, we talked about at the beginning of the show, building up this mind palace. We think we know how it's going to go, but what if we're wrong? Like, what if this is just a Justin Herbert team where he throws for 4,000 yards again?
And he is very good. But also, I mean, it's not like the quarterbacks in these Harbaugh Roman offenses don't produce. I mean, like, they do produce. They just have to be more efficient. But you look at McConkey, if he's Matt Waldman laid this argument out super, super concisely and precisely. And that if you're looking for the guy who's Keenan Allen's direct replacement, it's Lad McConkey. And if he dominates the targets there and he's the primary asset, he's going to put up some really decent numbers. And we've seen that in the past with the offenses in San Francisco in particular, whether it was Anquan Bolden or who else was it? Michael Crabtree.
Oh yeah. Going way back. Yeah.
Right. I mean, those guys under Roman had some decent seasons.
So we've got another pick coming up here. Deontay Johnson sits atop the queue. We'll see if he makes it to us, but also David Montgomery, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Alvin Kamara, Keon Coleman, Kyler Murray just went off the board. So we have our choice between Deontay, David Montgomery, JSN, Alvin Kamara, Keon Coleman, Aaron Jones, Ramondre Stevenson. Who do you like here, Bob?
I'm ready for another running back. It's probably going to be like, I love Alvin Kamara. I think I might want to take a little bit of a chance. I do love David Montgomery, right? But I think Kamara, there's maybe a little chance for a rebound here with the Clint Kubiak offense. Maybe
he needs a rebound. He was the per game RB5 last year.
Per game RB5, but I think just in general, and granted, he missed the first 4 games, and that was an issue as well. But I do think that this offense, if look, I chase volume, anticipated volume. If we're thinking, this whole San Francisco offense shows up somewhere, we're going to get, that kind of like usage, and maybe not 20 touches a game, but something in that range. I think Kamara will kill. And also the offensive line upgrade there, it makes a difference too to me. That is much necessary.
So I think we have an interesting question here that we can dig into a little bit, Bob, as we wait for our next pick. We got Shopkey in the chat saying, question, Kansas City wideouts and running backs in the last 5 years has been 100% letdowns. Why do we actually think that will change this year? I'm avoiding them all except Kelce. Now, I think that this is kind of one of those situations where they've just been bad. Like, when we're looking, and we'll talk about the wide receivers a little bit, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Justin Watson, Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney, like they've just been bad wide receivers. The last time we saw a good wide receiver in Kansas City was Tyreek Hill, and he was consistently a top 5 guy. Right. So I'm okay kind of going back to the well this year with the revamped wide receiver room with Marquise Brown and Xavier Worthy. As for Isaiah Pacheco, we saw him giving us low-end RB1 numbers last year, and now with Jerick McKinnon out of the picture, I'm expecting that role to grow even a little bit. So I don't know. Bob, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Is that what we're doing right now with Kansas City?
Maybe yes, or maybe we're looking at the added speed here and saying maybe we can see an offense something closer when Tyreek Hill was there, when Patrick Mahomes' average depth of target was more than 9 yards, right? And you have 2 guys with sub 4.3 speed to choose from in Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy, that's going to open some things up for some other players there as well. I'm not drafting any of those other players not named Pacheco or Kelsey, but I think both those guys are. I think Marquise Brown in particular is ideally positioned this year to finally make good, on some of what we've expected from him throughout his career. But again,
That's
this
like
is
double insanity, right? We're not
right.
only betting on a Kansas City wide receiver, but we're also betting on Hollywood Brown, who we bet on for 5 years and been let down year after year. So, the stars are
We're
aligning for us.
betting on
It's
Patrick
really
Mahomes
foolish. Yeah, exactly. Right.
and Andy Reid.
Yeah, exactly. And you'd think those are pretty good bets, but I think it's just been a bad stroke of luck. Like they've just had some very bad wide receivers there. Like you look at those guys, led the league in drops last year for a wide receiver room. They just had bricks for hands. They couldn't get open. So hopefully this year we see things change a little bit. But here
It's
we are in just a couple of picks. We got Jonathan Brooks on the board, who I know you and I both like. That would be a dream if he falls a couple more picks to us. Also, Zamir White, Jalen Warren, Zach Moss. This is, in my opinion, where you really kind of beef up the running back room a little bit because the wide receivers on the board, Curtis Samuel, not too crazy about that. Jonathan Brooks made it to us. Can I make the pick here, Bob?
I'll let you go ahead. I like Zamir White as well. I'm a little less keen on Zach Moss at this point, but I think all those guys, like, if we were a little later, Raheem Mostert wouldn't bug me given the way we started out our backfield as well.
And this is a strong running back room. We were
Yeah,
still able to beef up our wide receivers where we got our 4 good wide receivers with Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Malik Neighbors, and Lad McConkey. Got an elite tight end in Mark Andrews, and then a heck of a running back room with Isaiah Pacheco, Alvin Kamara, and Jonathan Brooks. So we're probably trending towards a build where we'll want 3 quarterbacks here since we've missed out on some of the early quarterbacks. But if there's one position that I'm okay taking a quantity over quality approach, it's quarterback. Because, you can get a random 25-point game from Derek Carr or, whoever it may be at the end of drafts, or maybe we hit on Bo Nix, Drake May, one of these rookies. So here we are in just another pick. I know you said you like Raheem Mostert. He's still on the board as well. So is Tony Pollard, or, we've already drafted Alvin Kamara. If we want to add a wide receiver here, I love Rashid Shaheed.
I think that's not a bad play. I was looking at that myself. I think that might be the direction for me as well. I think our running back room is solid. We've got a good start there.
And Raheem Mostert, we talked about him in an episode that just is going to air later today. So for anybody who's subscribed on the YouTube channel right now, you'll get a little sneak peek. Alfredo and we did a show on players with huge upside and huge downside. Those guys in the middle round that you can draft could be league winners or could just be totally busted picks. And we talked about Raheem Mostert. What we saw last year, amazing. And if he can carry that into next year, we're looking at another amazing season. But it's also possible that Raheem Mostert scores 3 touchdowns and is the RB3 behind Jalen Wright and Devon Achane. So I don't mind the pick there. He's a guy that I sprinkle in here and there, but not a guy that I'm really beating the table for. We got Dave Mo for show in the chat saying, why risk a high pick on a top 5 tight end when you can wait until almost the end of the draft to grab Fant and Freiermuth? Bob, you've been doing this for a long, long time. Tell me why you would draft an elite tight end instead of waiting for a late round tight end.
Because I want more certain production at the position, and like I get it with Freiermuth, I get it with Fant, all those guys. You're hoping for the best. We've hoped for the best. The hopium flows strong at the tight end position, and we can go back through, Juwan Johnson, Chigakonkwo. There's always a series of guys that we think are going to make these tremendous leaps that just never quite make the tremendous leap. Some of them do, right? But I'll say Arthur Smith, like he's going to run a lot of multiple tight end sets, right? 2-3 set tight end sets, and Freiermuth seems like he's going to be a big part of this offense. The lack of proven wide receiver 2, 3, 4 is probably going to be a little bit of an issue, and maybe creates a little more bandwidth for him. But it's the maybe part that bothers me. I want one of the sure things. And I going back to Mark Andrews, like just eyeball test wise, like I'm not going to sit here and tell you to go grind the film and look at all the analytic metrics and all that. I'm going to tell you, watch a game and tell me Mark Andrews isn't the best receiver on the field when he's on the field. Like receiver, not tight end, best receiver. And the connection with
he is the wide receiver 1 in Baltimore.
Right. Yeah. And the connection with Lamar is just locked in. So I want one of those elite guys. I want one of the target monsters, one of the guys that's going to dominate. Evan Ingram, for that reason, I'm like, he's not going to get 140 plus again this year, but the year before he had over 90. He's going to be a big part of that offense.
Top
I want those guys.
Right.
Here's the thing, kids. You're going to find me chasing volume a lot at all the positions, like the sure volume. And I like to call it anticipated volume because you don't know until the season starts, but you have a pretty good idea of what direction things are going. Look at the recent trends. I want some of that, and I'm not going to take chances on outlier or what I view as outliers. And at tight end, everyone past Kincaid feels like an outlier. Like even David Njoku, who is coming off a huge season. That huge season was built in large part off a short stint with Joe Flacco, not so much with his longer stint with Deshaun Watson, which has not been overly impressive, right? And I get it. I mean, I think we saw in Cleveland late last season exactly the offense Kevin Stefanski was hired to install in Cleveland.
And I don't know if Deshaun Watson can run it.
Doesn't have the quarterback to do it.
Right. So, and the last thing I'll say about this with the tight ends last year, I mean, we saw as clear of a delineation at the top as we possibly could. Everyone remembers Sam Laporta finishing as the overall tight end one because he was healthy for every single game and he caught a lot of touchdowns. If you look at a per game basis, Travis Kelce, TJ Hawkinson, and Mark Andrews were 1, 2, and 3, each averaging exactly 14.6 points per game. So if that isn't a clear-cut tier one right there, Travis Kelce, TJ Hawkinson, and Mark Andrews, I don't know what is. Of course, Hawkinson coming off the ACL. So here we are up on the board again. We've got Blake Corum available, Mike Williams, Jacoby Myers, Gus Edwards, Dontavian Wicks, Chase Brown. Who jumps out to you here, Bob?
Gus Edwards kind of jumps out at me as a touchdown scorer here. But there's two directions you can go here. Blake Corum for that super huge upside. I know Ben Cummins put this on the, on our Team Vibes series on Football Guys. If something happens to Kyron Williams, you're looking at a guy that's going to have an 80% share of the backfield there. So
I'm not sure there's a handcuff with more upside than Blake Corum.
I totally agree with that. I like Edwards though. I think people are maybe like, I talked to Joe Reedy from the Associated Press the other day, and we were kind of like, working through the whole backfield notion. Like, well, he says, well, and in his mind, like a guy that covers the team every day, as we're trying to throw out the Kamani Vidals and J.K. Dobbins, he's going, you guys, Gus Edwards is the 3-down back there. He's the guy that everyone has talked about, right? That's what Joe Horty, the general manager, talked about it. His track record under Greg Roman, when Roman and Edwards were together in Baltimore, is very solid. And I mean, and he's coming off a 13 touchdown season, by the way, which he's not going to score 13 touchdowns again, I don't think. But also, I think he's going to have the lead role. So I think you're taking your chances with other guys. And I think at this point, as your fourth running back, at this pick, I mean, I think it's hard for me to pass on him at this point. And there's another back you and I both love, and maybe we'll still land him, but we should probably start looking at some other spots too.
Well, here we are up next, and Jerry Jeudy just went off the board, who would have been my preferred target, but we've still got Mike Williams and Dontavian Wicks available. At the running back position, we have Chase Brown and Austin Eckler. None of these quarterbacks really work with our current build. We can go down a little bit to Josh Downs. Who jumps out to you, Bob?
I want to say it's Wicks because I want a piece of the Green Bay offense.
Yeah.
And that's probably the direction I go right here.
Yeah. So I'm okay with Dontavian Wicks, and I think this is one of those the two guys that I find myself drafting. We like Christian Watson, who we mentioned earlier. Sky high ceiling there. It's hard for me to pay up for Jaden Daniels, but I don't know if it's going to be Dontavian Wicks or Bo Melton who's going to see the field. But both of those guys, if you look at what they did on small sample sizes last year, truly elite. I pointed it out this morning, kind of a little bit tongue in cheek, but I've been talking about Bo Melton a lot. Right. Only one guy in the league had more targets on a per route run base than Bo Melton last year, and it was Tyreek Hill.
Right.
Yards per route run, the only guys that had more: Brandon Ayuk, Nico Collins, and Tyreek Hill. So we only saw Bo Melton on the field for a short little stint last year, but he was dominant there. But then right behind him in almost every single category is Dontavian Wicks. And neither of these guys really got warmed up until the second half of the season. And it makes sense. Wicks was a rookie. Bo Melton was a year two guy who didn't play a single snap his rookie season. So there is just, I have no idea what to make of this Packers wide receiver room. I have absolutely no idea, Bob.
And that's why we're like, well, I know what to make of it. Christian Watson is the guy that we've seen over the stretches be a dominant force at the position. If he's healthy, he would continue to be a dominant force. We can go back to the rookie year, the 4-game, 7-touchdown stretch. We can look at last year. There was a tremendous stretch as well. He's just got to stay healthy. Hopefully the scientists have figured out which quad needs to be 17% bigger than it currently is, and they get it there and all that stuff. But like a couple things. I mean, nobody's going to remember this team unless we win a bunch of money with it. But also, and so I want those players that can probably have that super huge upside. And if anything happens on this receiving core, Wicks looks like a guy that can move up. There's another name out there, and I'll just throw it out here. Like Noah Brown is a guy that,
Yeah.
throwing some flyers on late in drafts that people have totally forgotten about. They've also totally forgotten about, what he did last year when there was an injury or two. And it seemed like that Texans receiving core has never been 100% healthy, or never was last year. There was always a missing piece, and someone stepping up and getting the job done.
Yeah, and I think that when it comes to throwing darts at later round wide receivers, which, 10th round isn't or 11th round isn't super, super late, but we're getting out there. That's where I want to be looking at guys that are on good offenses,
Yep.
because an injury, let's say Jaden Reed goes down, Christian Watson goes down, something like that. Then all of a sudden, Dontavian Wicks being a full-time player on a good offense, the efficiency doesn't even matter at that point. Like, if he's getting a full-time role on a good offense, he's going to be productive. So
Right.
that's what I'm looking for there.
We have a comment in the chat, Rubio,
Yeah,
if healthy for sure. Like, I throw out the if
right.
healthy, right? Like, I'm injury agnostic. I get it that guys that have had chronic injuries are issues. Guys that are, but there's a difference between a chronic injury and chronically injured. I mean, sometimes it's just bad luck, right? Like, you look at Saquon Barkley the year he stepped on somebody's foot and twisted his ankle. I mean, it's not that he's injury prone. It's just that it was a moment of bad luck. So I try to throw all that out the window. I realize it's a factor, but I'm just going to ignore it because I want to get really good players.
I think I'm going to make an executive decision as you were talking here,
Go
Bob.
ahead.
Justin Herbert just fell to us a round below ADP. We've already got Lad McConkey. We've got
Win.
Gus Edwards. So
Win.
let's go
That's
Chargers.
perfect.
Yeah, you love it. I'm not somebody who tries to force stacks aggressively. What I like to do, especially when I'm taking this kind of late round wide receiver
Nicely organic
approach that we're taking here, is I set myself up for multiple options.
Right, and we still have others that we can jump into as well.
Daniel Jones, Derek Carr, Bryce Young. Like, we have a lot of other options here. So when you set yourself up for multiple options, you don't have to force it. I mean, even with this next pick, we've got Jalen Waddle. Like, if Tua falls to us, we could take Tua right here. And then I'd actually be okay with just those two quarterbacks if we went Herbert and Tua.
I probably would too. Kirk
Cousins is available. Doesn't work with us. So
happens.
let's go ahead and throw Tua in the queue just in case he falls to us. I mean, that would be over 2 full rounds below ADP. But if he doesn't, we've got some fallback options. Quentin Johnston, if we want to double down on the Chargers wide receiver room here. Ricky Pearsall, a guy that I really like, is still available. Jermaine Burton, another high upside rookie. But then we can get a little bit lower down the list. We've got Luke Musgrave available, which we already drafted Dontavian Wicks. I don't mind that at all. One pick out, though, and Tua is still available. We were talking about a 3 quarterback build, but if we've got both of these guys falling who work with players that we've already drafted and getting them well below ADP, I think that's a totally safe room there.
Yeah, I do too.
If Tua does get picked here, who would be the fallback option? Are you thinking Quentin Johnston as well?
Yeah, like I'm hoping he gets better, right? We got him.
There goes Quentin Johnston off the board, so made the decision for us. How about that, Bob? Looking at these ADPs, Justin Herbert's usually going at pick 133. We got him at 141, and then Tua normally going at pick 125. We got him at 148.
Like, this is the key. This is great. Like, I get, like, I'm not a slave to ADP. I'm not going to sit there and let it drive me, and I'm not afraid to jump a few picks ahead. But I'm not looking to jump way ahead. It's like, we can go into Jeff Ratcliffe's rant, like, do you walk into Starbucks and tell them you want to pay $20 for your $5 coffee? No, you wait until you can pay $5. You pay $5 for it. So, like, I'm all about that. But also, I mean, there are certain players that I want that I'm willing to move up a little bit. But what feels better than getting guys after? What feels better than getting a discount? Like, I'm old, mean, and cheap. Nothing makes me happier than getting a discount.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about that too. Like, when you wait on a player and then they fall into your lap, like we were looking with when we took Justin Herbert, it's like, do we go Herbert or Tua? We went with Herbert, and then Tua falls to us.
Still get him.
It's beautiful when that happens. It's like what Jacksonville did at the draft this year. Like, we knew they wanted Brian Thomas, but they traded back, they accrued more value, and then they still got Brian Thomas later in the draft. Few things feel better than that.
Well, is Jalen Wright still on the board, or did he?
I believe I just saw him get drafted, because that would have been a nice one. Let's see what other Dolphins are available. There's one guy that jumps out to me, Jonnu Smith, that I'm thinking he's really the only other guy that we can add to this Tua stack. But
I have so much Jonnu Smith
that
this
late
year
in the draft. With that's a guy I would be willing to reach for multiple.
I would
reasons. One, ceiling is tremendous. Two, we've already got Tua here, and the only other pass catcher that we have for Miami is Jalen Waddle. But once you get later in the drafts, I'm willing to reach. I'm not reaching a full round for a guy in the first couple of rounds. But once you get into round 14, 15, 16, 17, just plant your flags and get the players you want.
Right. I mean, you and I both would have loved to have Jaleel McLaughlin. We're huge on him, just like, Cecil Lammy has said, for the reasons we've talked about. The coach loves him, the playmaking ability, the way this offense is going to be designed. If I'm not mistaken, Bo Nix throws about 90% of his passes at or
Yep.
behind the line of scrimmage, kids.
Yep.
That's so we're gonna work in Jaleel McLaughlin's favor. So I'm all on board with that. But once you miss out on him, then I start thinking about Jalen Wright, given that our build. And then once he's not there, then yeah, I'm perfectly fine. This is the point where you can start focusing, to me, on the correlations, the builds, and the things like that. Once I have a bunch of good players, then I feel like I can start taking some chances on guys and maybe making some big swings on players I wouldn't otherwise do.
Yeah, so I think Carolina, I don't know if we want to go with Chuba Hubbard or not. I mean, we do basically lock up that Panthers backfield because we already
Yeah,
got
I'm not
Jonathan
against
Brooks
that.
early. So I wouldn't be against that. We've also got Kamani Vidal if we want to kind of do the same thing with the
Not for
Chargers.
that.
A lot of options here. We're up in about 10 seconds here, and then we'll have 30 seconds to make our pick. So Kamani Vidal, Roman Wilson, Chuba Hubbard, Antonio
Hubbard for
Gibson.
me.
Hubbard. All right.
Yeah.
I like it. And it's funny. I tweeted about how Jonathan Brooks was one of my favorite picks in draft this year. And Sigmund Bloom, another football guy, quickly commented and said, I hope you're building some non-Brooks teams with Chuba Hubbard as well. Because
Right.
again, we build up this like, oh, Jonathan Brooks, all of the upside in the
Oh.
world. And that's the guy that we want to draft. And he's getting drafted in round 7 or 8 as he should be. But you can't forget that just last year, Chuba Hubbard over the second half of the season saw like 24 opportunities per game or something like that.
Right. Definitely next in line. And like we all have huge hopes for this Dave Canales led offense. I mean, Dave Canales is there for a reason. Fix Bryce Young. They bring in the offensive guards and bolster the offensive line. They bring in Deontay Johnson. They draft Xavier Legette. They bring in Jonathan Brooks. I mean, they're making a lot of moves that tell you, like, David Tepper is not a patient man, people.
Right.
Nor is he probably pleasant to be around when he's not happy. So they're going to do everything they can to make him happy. And Dave Canales has one job: fix Bryce Young. And fixing Bryce Young means running the ball better, means blocking better, and it means adding a little more playmaking ability at wide receiver. And so, like
And they've done all that.
You mentioned it. Bryce Young is a possible quarterback. I have him in a lot of my 3 quarterback builds as my 3rd quarterback, and in 2 QB leagues, he's kind of one of my firewall quarterbacks. He and Bo Nix. If I'm not paying attention and all of a sudden I'm to the tail end of the quarterbacks, I still feel pretty comfortable with either of those 2 guys in 2 quarterback leagues as my 3rd quarterback. Because
So
the job security.
For Jonnu here, we're on the clock. Our next pick is 189, and that's his ADP is 189.
I would go ahead and reach here.
And I think I don't mind doing this at all. Like I said, our next pick is pick 189. His ADP is pick 189. So we could play hey, hopefully he falls to ADP, but he's a guy that
could just have him.
Exactly. And that's it. Like why play with fire here? I am A-okay taking Jonnu Smith. So at this point, we're good on quarterback. I mean, we got Justin Herbert and Tua Tagovailoa. We're good on tight end. We got Mark Andrews and Jonnu Smith. So I am just going to change these filters here. All we're looking at for the rest of this draft is running back and wide receiver.
Works for me.
We can kind of talk through some potential guys that we would be interested in. Now, this is a BBM draft, so let's just talk about, the potential of making it to week 17 and wanting to set ourselves up for that high-end range of outcomes. The Chargers are playing the Patriots, and the Dolphins are playing the Browns. So the 2 guys that jump out to me, late-round picks that we can stack in here, the Patriots have a ton of wide receivers. Javon Baker's probably gone by now. Demario Douglas is gone by now. But let's see if there are any Patriots still available. We could get Javon Baker a little bit later, so we'll throw him in the queue. And then the other guy that would jump out to me would be Deonta Foreman.
Right. That's what I was going to say. I have so much Deonta Foreman, and we can talk about what our thoughts are on Nick Chubb. Like, I'm not optimistic. The Browns have been very vague about the timeline. I know the recent reporting this week has been super optimistic. Okay, I'll believe it when I see it. Let's remember it was 2 surgeries, right? One right after he hurt it in week 2 to fix the MCL and the first bit of damage. The ACL repair didn't happen until November. This is
which puts him on a similar timeline to like TJ Hawkinson. And I don't think people are talking about that. They see the week 2 injury and don't realize that his surgery that he's recovering from came basically at the end of the season.
Right. So I'm not as optimistic, but I'm listening to what the Browns are saying. Yes, we expect him back for 2024. No other timeline. I think it's unrealistic to expect him back early. Like, I'm fine with Jerome Ford, but the price differential between Ford and Deonta Foreman is insane. I'll take my chances on Foreman I have in many, many drafts. I should look at my percentage. It's ridiculous.
And I'm just going to say, Bob, a lot of what we're seeing right now, this Nick Chubb hype, it's marketing and I think it's really good marketing on the Browns' part, but, like,
It is.
there was a whole video about, like, "Oh my gosh, look at this. Nick Chubb stood up after his surgery." Everybody. Like, you don't have to be a world-class athlete to do that. Like, you leave the hospital on a wheelchair, and an hour later, you're on crutches. So, like, what
Right.
he did, it's a great story, don't get
I
me
had a
wrong.
friend who
Like,
got a hip
it doesn't
2 weeks ago. He walked out of the hospital with a hip replacement, right? I mean, it's just
exactly. So I think a lot of people see this like, they think it's this miraculous thing, but that's a pretty normal timeline for an injury recovery. And then even that video of him, working out, you can see his one leg, his injured leg, his left leg was significantly smaller than his other leg. And as he's jumping, he's a little wobbly. So I think he
well,
still has a decent recovery ahead of him, especially at age
like, I think this is
29.
even a concern with Brooks. I mean, I think when you're drafting Brooks, you have to acknowledge you're drafting him for the late season run. You're not, if
Right.
you get something early in the season, fantastic. And like, he's a younger player. A lot to like. The injury was the first week of November. So
Mhm.
and there were no other associated injuries. So the repair was right away and they get right in on the rehab. But I mean, you're playing him for, like, if I'm drafting him, I'm drafting him as a league winner down the stretch.
Right.
Right. And I think he's priced right for that. And I'm perfectly fine with it. And there are other pieces. We end up with Chuba Hubbard. So, I mean, but thinking a player with the history that Chubb has is just going to rebound. I don't know. I think that's, like, I hope it happens. And congratulations to him and whoever drafted him if it does. I have no shares from Nick Chubb this year, or very few. I'm not going to say none.
So here we are on the clock. Javon Baker probably makes the most sense
Yep.
unless you really prefer Malachi Corley,
Nope.
Michael Wilson. All right,
Baker's
Javon
it.
Baker it is. He's a late round guy.
Big play
These
threat.
guys don't always hit, but man, you watch his videos, like
Right.
you get a minor St. Brown vibes. I hate to say it, but one of these late round guys that like has a chip on his shoulder about
Yep.
being a late round guy. And it
For
just
sure.
seems like he shows up to practice every day saying, I'm going to prove everybody wrong. We're going totally down narrative street here, right? Like
Well,
no
that's what we
analytics or
do,
anything,
though.
but sometimes you just want to bet on
Uh,
players and personalities.
Again, this is this is the time of the year to do that. And like, we'll have time as we get into August and we start doing the drafts that that are more meaningful to us, our favorite redraft for leagues or whatever. These drafts are going to inform us, but also what happens on the field will start informing us. But at this point, narratives are what we have, right?
Right.
And telling ourselves happy stories. It's not hard with Javon Baker, that's for sure.
Yeah. So we've got another pick up here. We could probably wait until our 18th pick for Deonta Foreman, but it's
Yep.
also kind of one of those situations where, we could just
Who
make the
else do we
pick
want?
now.
Right. I
Yeah,
mean,
and that's the thing. Nobody jumps out. Braylon Allen, Roshan Johnson, Damian Pierce, maybe
yeah,
Clyde Edwards-Helaire
Clyde
worth a couple of
Edwards-Helaire is a
those.
guy that I've been adding a lot. Is a last round, as a final pick in a lot of these drafts, just in case something happens to Pacheco.
I
Add
prefer
to it if we
Foreman.
have Pacheco. I
I
prefer
definitely
Foreman
prefer
for sure.
Foreman. So we'll take Foreman right here, and then I think what that'll do, assuming he falls to us, which we may have jinxed ourselves. All right, we'll take Foreman here, and then I think that closes us out for running backs. We didn't do, a super early running back. This isn't quite zero running back. We took Pacheco, but Pacheco, Kamara, Jonathan Brooks, Gus Edwards, Chuba Hubbard, Deonta Foreman. I think we've got a really good mix here of guys who are projected early season volume, especially
Yeah,
in Pacheco, Kamara, and
I
Edwards.
love
We've
this
also got
mix.
the potential late season hammer with Jonathan Brooks. We've got Chuba Hubbard there to offset any
Right.
lack of production we get from Jonathan Brooks. And then Deonta Foreman, another guy who we're expecting early season production, but who knows? Like maybe Chubb doesn't come back and he is just one of these guys at the end of the year that we are just
We've
shocked
seen him do
taking
this
production from.
before
Right.
as a Titan. I love
As
this
a
running back
Titan,
room.
as a
Yeah.
Panther, as a Bear, and now
Yep.
maybe as a Brown. I mean,
Yep.
yeah, and we forget like Deonta Foreman, he was a day 2 pick. Very good prospect coming into the league. Looked good his rookie season and then ruptured his Achilles. He is like the one guy I think we've seen in NFL history. I don't know, Bob. You're probably a better NFL historian than I, but have we ever seen a guy bounce back from an Achilles injury and like still be productive for more than a handful of games?
Uh, it doesn't happen a lot. I mean, we'll see if yeah, it doesn't happen a lot, right? Like, I can't think of anyone that, like, well, this year is going to be telling for guys like Aaron Rodgers, but I mean, and Kirk Cousins,
For Cousins and Cam Akers and
but
J.K. Dobbins.
I think it's a hell of a lot easier for the quarterbacks than it is the running backs.
Exactly. And we've seen the NBA, like basketball players have gotten over the Achilles hurdle. We've seen it with Kevin Durant and Kobe Bryant and some other big names, but yeah, have yet to see it from running backs and wide receivers. So I think with this last pick, we're kind of locked in. I don't want to say locked in, but we're probably taking a wide
Wide
receiver
receiver.
with this last pick here. Who is your favorite late round wide receiver? We've got, uh, I, I don't know if you can read these names off on the
We got
queue from
Chark
Jumps.
is sitting there.
Chark works. I like it. Yeah, we missed out on Quentin Johnson earlier.
Yep.
And man, DJ Chark, if there's one player that I get reminded of when I watch DJ Chark, I wonder if you're in the same mindset as me, Bob. Who do you think I'm going to say?
Um,
I'm thinking Mike Williams.
well, yeah,
Just
sure.
a big-bodied guy who can get
He's
outside the numbers and make some contested catches. And the problem with DJ Chark is like maybe we're just trying to recapture lightning in a bottle because it was what, like 6 years ago
right.
that
It
Chark had
was
his breakout, and we haven't seen it since. But like,
right.
man, the
But
size, the speed, the contested catchability, I continue to get allured by it. And we've already made a bet on the
I,
Chargers offense, so why not triple down?
right. I think that's 100% it. And like, and we like, I still fully expect 2013 Josh Gordon to walk in the room at some point here, and like I mean, we do that with wide receivers though, right? Like we can pin like who Allen Robinson, like how
Yep.
long did a single season basically carry him, and so I'm fine with that. Like, but I do think that the way our build went, that last pick makes perfect sense.
And I think some of these, I mean, a lot of this, I think you and I draft very similarly, Bob, and I realize that on this show. I feel like a lot of times when I see people drafting best ball teams, they're looking with their first 2, 3 picks. Like, how do I correlate these picks? How do I
Right.
stack these picks? And I very much just like, hey, let the value
More
fall to
organic.
me in the early rounds. We'll get some good value with the first 6, 7, 8, 9 picks. And then from there, we can kind of tie together some loose ends. We can build our stacks out. We can get some late round correlations. And that's exactly what we did here. Jamar Chase falling to us at 4. We didn't have a decision to make there. Jalen Waddle was a great value to us in the second. Malik Neighbors, great value in the third. Isaiah Pacheco, right around ADP, but I think that's when you want to get at least one running back. Mark Andrews falling into our lap in round 5 was an easy choice. And then from there, we started just kind of getting some players that we liked. And then we started building out. We had Kamara. So Shaheed worked with the need that we had at wide receiver, also investing a little bit more in the Saints. And doing that opens us up for a potential late round Derek Carr. Gus Edwards, that's what kind of opened us up for the Chargers,
Yep.
which that's crazy to think. We really
just
stacked the
jumped right
Chargers
into
pretty
that.
heavily. Yeah, Lad McConkey here, and then Gus Edwards fell into our lap, and then Justin Herbert, and then DJ Chark. And all of a sudden, by the time we done drafting this team, we're Chargers fans.
But if I'm telling myself a happy story here about the Chargers, it's that Jim Harbaugh comes in and things go really well, really fast. Yeah. And then he wears out his welcome, also almost equally fast. But it's great while it goes. It's like a candle that burns on both ends. It burns bright but fast, right? So yeah, I like this. I do think there are going to be leagues or there are going to be contests and some BBMs where I try to keep up with the geniuses, and I really do try to work on the correlation, and I have a plan going in advance. I don't think that's a fun way for me to draft. Like, and I know, I mean, I like just drafting the players I want and the players that I have feelings about and hunches on and doing a lot of that. But I do think, if you're drafting in a lot of leagues, and you and I are, and I know not everyone does, but I mean, I think that's part of the fun. You can try all these various strategies and approaches. Some of it's based on the correlation. You're looking at those late season schedules, all those kind of things. Yes, they all matter. And you can go in and look at the theory behind, the BBMs and what's won in the past and what hasn't. Like, oh, we got to have 4 receivers through round 7. Okay, we got to have, all that. And like, I will do some of that just to see how it plays out. But mostly I'm not drafting, like I don't buy the lottery ticket assuming I'm going to win, but I'd like to. And so I want to give myself some chances. So I'm going to do some of those more, technically precise drafts. But this kind of draft is my favorite kind of draft.
And also, I don't want to say that that's like the wrong way to draft by any means, but that's how it's won in years past. But now you've got everybody kind of playing by the same set of rules that I don't know if that's the edge necessarily, because everybody's doing the same thing. So, I'm doing
honestly,
hundreds of drafts this offseason, and I'll have fun sometimes. And I'll just go, you know what? I'm going to start my draft with 3 straight running backs. I know I'm not supposed to, and it's against the rules. But if nobody else, you're telling me I could walk away from a draft with Bijan Robinson, Saquon Barkley, and Jonathan Taylor as my top 3 running backs, and you're going to tell me that is a bad way to start a draft? I don't think so. I mean, maybe it is, but I'm willing to take a chance and find out.
I'm with you. And like part of this is, we're going to sit here and we're going to be communicating our ideas throughout the course of the season. We can fall back on these experiences we've had in drafts. I mean, that's probably 75% of the reason why I draft is so I can sit here and discuss reasonably. And it's the same within season when you're taking the calls and people want to have lineup decisions. I want to have a lot of lineup decisions. So I play in a lot of leagues and I put myself in position to have that. So I think this is the, again, it's like weightlifting, man. We're exercising our draft muscle or getting it in shape or getting primed for the drafts that matter the most to us. But these drafts can matter too. And we can try some unique experimentation. It's like the laboratory. Go ahead
Exactly.
and mix some stuff up that you wouldn't ordinarily do.
Yep. And there's plenty of opportunity to do that, especially if you're drafting on Underdog Fantasy. If you use promo code Football Guys, you'll get a 50% deposit match, with up to $250 in bonus cash. So be sure to do that. But Bob, just want to thank you for the time today. This is always a pleasure. I do this every Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern at youtube.com/@footballguysfantasy. So be sure to tune in next week as we have a different guest on every single week. We're doing different strategies, different approaches, different player takes, different roster constructions. And that's what makes this show so much fun. Me getting to talk to some of the sharpest minds in the industry and just learning things here and there from different people. Bob, before we sign off, one more time, let everyone know where they can find you on social media, what you're working on at Football Guys, where they can find you on Sirius and all that good stuff.
At Football Diehard on the X machine, and you will find me retweeting a lot of content from Football Guys because it's fantastic and I love it all. I love my work colleagues. You can find my fantasy notebook there if your guys aren't subscribers yet, and you should be. We've got a 4th of July sale going, so get in on that. But the fantasy notebook's completely free. You'll see me tweet it. Also on Fridays, my fantasy notebook video, basically top 5 fantasy headlines. Today is a running back edition. There will be Jonathan Brooks talk, people, and Kluge will be highlighted in the discussion. And that comes out every Friday. And otherwise, we're going to have a ton of content coming out. Also, the Sirius schedule ramps up. We've been on the off-season schedule, which is Saturdays only. Mike Dempsey and myself will, starting July 15th, we'll be on 5 nights that week, and then we'll go to our usual 4 nights a week. And Dave Inceptions them. That's beautiful. 5 nights a week. This from 7:15 through that week. Then 4 nights a week after that, and then we'll get into the season. And you will be so tired of me on Sirius that you'll be looking for other channels. I recommend Liquid Metal. It's fantastic.
Bob, you've been doing it for 20 years and people aren't sick of you yet. So I think you've still got a little bit longer to keep doing this. But yeah, and if you're looking for more Jonathan Brooks talk later today on this exact YouTube channel that you're watching this right now at Football Guys Fantasy, Alfredo Brown and I are coming out with a players with high upside and high downside. And wouldn't you know it, I talk about Jonathan Brooks even a little bit more. So want to thank everybody for tuning in. Want to thank y'all for subscribing at Football Guys and subscribing to the YouTube channel. I'll be back next Friday at 11 a.m. as we try our best again to win $1.5 million on Underdog Fantasy. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week.